Okay, boom. I think we got it. Awesome, awesome. Welcome, welcome. Very excited to be back for this episode of On Black Joy with Dr. Joe Wong, who is absolutely incredible and literally changed my life before I even met him. He probably doesn't even know this, but I actually participated in your gratitude workshop my first semester in grad school.
Oh,
Some of
okay.
your students ran, and that really set the tone for me, I think, in actually starting this work around Black Joy and just helping me to think more about positive psychology in general. I hadn't actually had an opportunity to do anything like that before. I never even thought of the science of gratitude, right, before that workshop. But that experience was like critical. It was so useful for me. I think particularly being a graduate student and just the sort of pressure that we're constantly under, being able to have those resources and those tools at the very beginning of my program, I definitely think did wonders for me and for my mental well-being across this program. And so before we start, I want to say thank you again to you, Dr. Wong.
Yeah,
So yeah,
pleasure.
yeah. And so based on that, like I just said, Dr. Joe studies gratitude. And I wanted to just give you a second to introduce yourself, maybe talk a bit about your work, and then we'll just sort of jump into our conversation.
Yeah. So once again, I'm a professor in the School of Education, specifically in the Department of Counseling and Educational Psychology, and more specifically in the program Counseling Psychology. I'm also the chair of the department. My research spans a couple of different areas, but the one that's probably most relevant is positive psychology. Within positive psychology, I specifically study the psychology of encouragement and gratitude. It's good stuff. And of course, in regard to gratitude, um, there's a lot I can say, but clearly my research as well as that of other scholars has um provided evidence that gratitude activities produce positive mental health benefits. And so you could say I'm a bit of an evangelist for gratitude practices.
Mhm. I like that. So I guess my first question then is why gratitude? Like of all the things that you could have studied using your degree and your knowledge, why gratitude? Why? And I didn't know you studied encouragement. That's super
Yeah,
cool.
we can talk about that too.
Yeah. So like, why did you why did you pick
Yeah,
those two things? Like, why did that
yeah,
rise
yeah.
up in your work?
Sure. Yeah, I could talk about that. Part of it was interest, and part of it was happenstance. I'll say a little bit more about happenstance later. Interest, it's something that I've always been personally interested in, and for many years I've just sort of developed a habit of just thinking about what I'm grateful for, and I noticed that I play a little game with myself to just try. I'll take walks, and then I'll just try to count how many things I'm grateful for, and I'll like, okay, I'm gonna try to hit 10 or 15 or 20,
Right.
and I just found that to be a very uplifting activity. Now, I was just doing that informally, even before learning much about the science of gratitude. I mean, in grad school, I did read up a little bit about it. I thought, oh, this is really interesting. It's cool stuff. But I didn't really do much work on that. Um, I did take a survey on character strengths. It's something that I would recommend to anyone. It's called the VIA Survey of Character Strengths. And I think it's free. It used to be free. I hope it's still free. It's a whole bunch of questions, and they will document your top five character strengths. And gratitude was one of the five. So again, that was something that, you
Mm,
know, I was aware that this is an area of interest of mine. But this is where the happenstance came in. A couple of years ago, I uh, became aware of a call for proposals to submit a grant proposal to study gratitude. The entire uh, grant was about gratitude, and they were asking for submissions, research proposals to study gratitude. Um, and at a point in time, I had not done any research whatsoever on gratitude, like zero.
right.
And I was looking at it, I was like, I like to do it. I think this is a good chance to jump in. I have no experience whatsoever. Should I? Should I not? And I gave a call to my friend, and colleague, Josh Brown, who is a professor in the IU psychology departments. And I said, Josh, would you be interested in collaborating with me on this? And I was fully expecting him to say no, because this is not
Mm,
kind of his area of work either. It was not his area. It was not my area of research. And surprisingly, he said yes. I was like, yeah, no, let's do it. So this became a collaboration. We put up a proposal together where we were going to study the mental health benefits of kind of gratitude practices
mm,
for clients who are seeking therapy at IU, in the IU Counseling Center. And Josh studied uh, the neuroscience aspects of gratitude, where he actually puts people through the fMRI machine to study their brains,
mm,
and correlated that to their levels of gratitude. Whereas I studied the mental health benefits. It was a collaborative effort, and surprisingly, our grant was funded. To today, I was like, I asked myself, like, what did I do to deserve it? I mean, I had no prior experience in this, and we were one of the I think it was like 2% of the proposals were funded, and we were one of the few that were funded. So it was something that caught us by surprise. And so once we got into that, it's like one thing led to another, and we just started developing more and more studies on gratitude.
right. Sounds like it
Um,
was meant to be.
but it's a bit of happenstance that's involved.
Right. Definitely. What do you think in the years since this sort of lucky break, what do you think is the sort of biggest takeaway? If they're like maybe one or two, what do you think? What are the things that have like floated to the top for you about in this work? Like, or maybe what's the most surprising thing you've learned?
Yeah, yeah, sure. Um, oh, there's so many. I don't know if I can name
I
one.
know, right? I
That
know.
was a good question, I have to say. That was a good question. And I mean, I could say something, and then tomorrow I'll probably give you a different answer.
Right, right, right.
That's okay. It's a really good question. It's really getting me thinking about what's been the take home lesson, what's been interesting or surprising for me. Um, I think what has been uh, interesting and surprising, and also a lesson that I'm beginning to realize, both in my personal life and I suspect in the research too, is that there are really two. You can think of gratitude as having two components.
Okay.
There is, there's an intrapersonal and an interpersonal. Intrapersonal is like what you're grateful for. Interpersonal is what you're grateful to, like a person. And
Mhm.
the interpersonal component of gratitude is where you actually express gratitude to someone. Whereas the intrapersonal, you could like be, sitting alone and writing a journal and kind of writing about what you're grateful for.
Right,
So I think I think being able to recognize both dimensions of gratitude is important
right,
and maybe underappreciated. We usually just lump the two together, but they're sort of related and yet a little different. And actually, that's my next project that I want to embark on, which I want to study the interpersonal component, because I think it's been sort of neglected. And what I began to realize, um, is that some of us are not so good with the interpersonal components of
right. That's what I
gratitude.
was
We may
thinking.
be very good, and I'll probably say that of myself.
Right,
I don't want to come across as judging anybody. So I'll say it of myself that I think I'm better at the intrapersonal. And I said I'm really good at, you put me. I can take walks and I can think of 10 things I'm grateful for. And I realize I need to work on the interpersonal, and a lot of people need to. I realize not everyone's good at that. Um, and so that's part of the rationale for developing the gratitude group program,
right, 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 right.
where we have, because that is where you can run away from just practicing it alone.
Not at all,
You
right.
got to do it together in a community. And Quinta, you probably know this, that every week we end by having people talk about what you're grateful for, and you're supposed to express gratitude to each other too. So not just like what I'm grateful for myself, but I'm grateful to you because of what you said, that you blessed me.
Right.
And I think there's so much power. There's so much untapped potential. in people expressing gratitude to each other.
Right.
Uh, I call this the gift that keeps on giving. So let me explain why.
Okay.
If I express gratitude to you, Quentin, chances are I would have made you happier, right? So
Right.
I multiply the joy. It's not just me. I feel happy. We know that gratitude improves my joy,
Right.
but I'm also extending the joy to you.
Right.
So I've doubled the happiness here, right? Now, when you're happier, you tend to be grateful. People, I noticed that when you express gratitude to someone else, they tend to be grateful for the gratitude,
Right. They are.
right? I know of very few people who say, "Oh gosh, I hate it that you express gratitude." No, people feel touched. They feel very sometimes surprised, and there's a good chance that you will in turn express gratitude back to me, or at least say something positive back to me. So then the joy boomerangs back to me. So I call this a triple whammy.
Right.
I feel happy when I express gratitude. You feel happy. You express gratitude back to me. I feel happy again.
Right. It's like a
So
circle.
there's
Like
so much potential. Yeah, it just keeps bouncing back and forth. So the interpersonal component of gratitude, I think, is something that needs more attention in research. It also needs more attention and just in practice. We need to do it more. And I tell people, um, if you feel grateful to someone else, don't assume that they know about it. You got
right.
to say it.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, Joe, that's amazing. I'm just sitting here like blown away because it is. It's funny as you brought it up, and I started thinking about the workshop. I do remember initially at the beginning, and just in my own life, like when we had to express gratitude, it did kind of feel like what is
Yeah.
this? And and in those moments where I think about like my family, my friends, right? Like there is this assumption they're like, oh, they should just know, but like, how would they know if you aren't saying, if you aren't verbalizing this? And I like that. I feel like I'm going to be more active. And now that you just said it, I'm like, oh, there are so many people I probably should express gratitude to, so that they're aware. It's not just like in my head and in my body.
Yeah.
Because like you said, I like that this is a way for us to spread joy. This is a way for us to like actively collaborate with the people around us to create more gratitude, to create more joy for our friends, for our families, for our colleagues, for the people, anybody who does something nice for us. That's dope. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
I also like one of the big things I think that I took away from the group, and one of the things that I've been trying to do with the Black Joy Collective, uh, is to think about these things is like I think so often it's easy to think about gratitude and joy and love, these sorts of things as feelings, which makes them sort of more difficult to access. I feel
Yeah.
like, whereas like making something a practice, telling people like, no, like you can practice being grateful and then you will feel grateful. Or you can practice being joyful. Making it something that people can actively do for me was something that I felt like was really powerful in the workshop, because I don't think I had thought of gratitude in that way before. It's like, oh, like I want to feel this feeling more often. So from your workshop, I took away the journal, right? Like
Yeah.
the gratitude journal, and not only just writing down the journal, which is what I literally use this and tell this to everyone now, but like the grateful because was a
Yeah.
big
Yeah.
thing for me, right? Like because it was like not just saying that, oh, I'm grateful for the sky to the sun outside, but I'm grateful for the sun because it's been so gloomy, and today this is making me feel happy in this moment, and the importance of making sure that we are not only like naming the thing that we're grateful for, but adding in like some substance
Yeah.
was something that was like new to me. And so, how did you maybe? I guess like, could we talk about that a little bit? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Can I just comment on what you just said? You just made such an insightful point. I think I need to steal your tagline
make it,
in sort of marketing this
yeah,
because
right.
because it's no, what you just said. I mean, it's something I know intuitively, but you just put it so well that if you shift your attention from trying to be grateful to practicing gratitude, it becomes a lot easier, and
Yeah,
it feels a lot more intuitive. It feels easier to accept because being grateful is like, well, how just like it's
wow,
very touchy feely, but
right.
you practice something. It's like, yeah, I know I can practice basketball. I can practice, you do a lot of things that you practice every day in your life. But so that's a really nice way. I love how you put it.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, all right, okay. So back to the question about the being grateful because. So I think that's the secret sauce in in these practices of gratitude, and it explains to me. I think that's why being grateful, practicing gratitude in writing is often better than simply thinking about it. So I said when I was younger, I did a lot of gratitude practices, but mostly I was just thinking about it. You know what I mean? But the writing has power because when you write about it, you are actually elaborating on your thoughts. And so I see the word because as enabling you to elaborate and think deeper
Mm-hmm.
about why you're really grateful about this for this. The elaboration, that deeper reflection, that contemplation allows you to derive the full benefits of gratitude. Because I mean, it's like sometimes we intuitively know that we're grateful for something,
Right.
like we but then like why right? you
Right.
you might like, oh, I looked out of the window, I was like, oh, this is great. Or like today I had a great lunch, I was like, oh, lunch was I felt happy. But like, what was it about it that was so good? And
Right.
if you think about it a little bit more, you get more joy out of it.
Mm-hmm. I
So it's
like
that
that.
elaboration, I think, is
Mhm.
what the word because gets at.
I like that. I like that. What are some other maybe? So I love the journaling because I like to write.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Like,
Okay, good.
are there? What are some other maybe practices and things for people that you think are useful? I remember from like one of the ones I remember from the workshop was like we did like a savoring activity. We
Yeah,
did.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. What are some of the other sorts of activities for people who might not like to journal or who might have a difficult time keeping up with something like that? Are there some other practices that you've learned that you found to be similarly useful?
Yeah, I mean, I can throw out a whole series of gratitude practices that people can try. So I said, the one that you just mentioned, I just want to make it clear for those who have not attended the gratitude groups. It's the habit of writing three things you're grateful for
Thank you.
every day, and then explaining why you're grateful. So it's like, I'm grateful for whatever because, and then you just repeat the three times and just think of different things and just to try that, writing that every day. So that's I call this gratitude journaling. There's a lot of other things you can try. You could make a commitment to practicing interpersonal gratitude. um, Many of us think we do it, and it's almost like, maybe you went to Kroger and you just say thanks when you left, but that to me that doesn't really count. Because
Right, right,
when we say thanks, to the cashier, that's it's almost like hello, saying hello.
right,
So, but what I mean is to make a commitment to expressing heartfelt gratitude, where it's more deliberate, more intentional. You're really thinking about what you're grateful for and why you're grateful. And you could say, well, once a week, I'm going to make commitments to expressing heartfelt gratitude to someone, and that could be done either orally, or you can do it in writing over email or social media. And again, the goal is to go beyond just simply say, hey, thanks,
right,
but to actually maybe in a few sentences, doesn't have to be very long, but in a couple of sentences, hey, that thing that you did was just had such a big impact on my life. you
right,
know so something that goes a little bit more than just simply saying thanks, and just a commitment to doing that once a week, practicing the interpersonal gratitude. That would be um, a really nice practice. If you want to go even farther, you could write a gratitude letter. And that's something that you might recall is part of the gratitude group program. Kind of write a letter to someone that you're really grateful for, but you've not properly thanked. Maybe someone who has had a major impact on your life, and write a much longer letter and kind of document what the person did that was so powerful and impactful in your life, and document the benefits that you derived from this person's influence on your life. That's a much longer letter than just simply one or two sentences. And if you write that, I strongly encourage you to deliver the letter. Don't just write it and keep it in your drawer. I mean, you could do that, but the benefits, remember the boomerang effect, the,
right,
the multiplier, the gift that keeps giving would show up when you're able to deliver the letter to the person. You could send it to the person, mail it to the person, email it to the person, even better still, read it to the person.
mhm,
Um, and maybe make a commitment to doing that. I tried it at least once a year. That's so you got two different types of gratitude activities. A
right,
third one, which could be something that I still do today, is many of us take walks, and you go for a walk, or and kind of use that challenge for yourself. It's like a
Right.
little game that you play to yourself to say, you know what, I'm just going to keep um, thinking about things that I'm grateful for and why. So it's a little bit like gratitude journaling, but you're thinking in your head. And I'm just going to keep counting how many I'm grateful. Just kind of, oh, I'm grateful for this because of that. And it's a little game to see how many you can come up with. Some of us do that for our personal fitness. Like
Right.
we
Right.
challenge ourselves to do like, 10 push-ups a day or 10 pull-ups a day, and you keep increasing. So that's something you could try for yourself. Say, today I'm going to challenge myself to think of at least 10 or 15 things I'm grateful for when I take a walk. So
Mhm.
I'll stop you with three activities you can
No, I
try.
love those. Those are amazing. I'm gonna take the interpersonal ones. I think I'm going to challenge myself this year to be better about that, because I feel like, right, I like this idea of sharing our gratitude a
Yeah,
lot. Yeah, I like that. My next question was about the science. So, what is the science of gratitude? I think that was something,
yeah,
because again, when we think about gratitude and joy and love, often it is this sort of like ephemeral, sort of floaty,
yeah,
feeling sorts of things, which is important. But I think I like the fact that there is like a science to this. That there are people who actually,
right.
how do we break these things down? And not only how do we think about and define gratitude and these concepts, but how do they actually impact us, like our daily living, and the
Right.
impacts that these sorts of practices have on our overall well-being. And so I'd like to, maybe if you could talk a bit about that, like what does the science tell us? What are we learning about the impacts of gratitude on sort of like not only mental health, but sort of just like overall general well-being for people?
Yeah, sure. There's quite a bit of emerging evidence showing that gratitude activities, as well as just being grateful, people who are more grateful, um, tend to have both mental health benefits, physical health benefits. Physical health includes things like faster recovery from heart attacks, better sleep, lower blood pressure, and social benefits in terms of being better connected with people, better relationships. This is useful for romantic partners if you're expressing gratitude to your partner and it's heartfelt gratitude. It boosts your relationship.
Right,
Um, just to be able to again not just have grateful thoughts, but to actually say it.
right,
So you can talk about like why gratitude works, and I mean, science is, as you might suspect, is complex, and there isn't one mechanism. There are probably multiple um, avenues through which gratitude impacts kind of good outcomes.
right.
So I mean, I can go through a few
Yeah,
and say that they're not mutually exclusive. There are several. There are probably different mechanisms that work together. Particularly, obviously, when you express interpersonal gratitude, the social components is often the mechanism that helps you derive good outcomes, right? Because
right,
when you're expressing gratitude to someone else, you become happier. Why? Partially because of the closer, more intimate relationship that you now have with that person.
right,
Because you express gratitude to that person, the person is more grateful to you. Therefore, your relationship is stronger. When your relationship is stronger, it makes you happier too. So
right,
that's that social interpersonal components. Um, there's also a cognitive component in terms of like the way you think. So you think of our mind as a radar, right? That picks up things. Some of us have a positive radar, and some of us have a negative radar. The negative things in our life, and we really hone in on the negative things in our life. We pick it up really fast,
right,
and that's where we go downhill, and the negative thoughts that we have snowball, and we start ruminating on
right,
negative things, right? It happens to some of us sometimes. So one of the things that gratitude does, and again, that was seen in my research as well as that of other colleagues, is that it sort of shifts your attention away from the negative. It sort of displaces the negative thinking, negative focus, so that your attention is less on what's negative in your life,
right,
and therefore it shifts to kind of what's positive in your life. I don't want to give a very practical example of my personal life. I mean, I find about there are times where I get upset. I mean, I do get upset sometimes, and
Right.
really upset, and sometimes even angry about certain situations. Particularly when it involves people, like you're upset with someone or you're angry with somebody. And I find that in those situations, um, one of the ways I get out of it is to practice a gratitude.
Right.
So it's a very it's a strange kind of indirect effect. So instead of tackling the problem head on, instead of trying to say, well, how can I be less upset? I just start thinking about things that I'm grateful for. And sometimes I'm not even thinking about things that are directly related to the situation. But once I start thinking about what I'm grateful for, my attention starts shifting away. I start ruminating less about that situation. After a while, I'm like, you know what? It's just not that big a deal
Right.
after all.
Right.
So that displacement of that negativity. So there is that social component. I mentioned there is a cognitive component, right? Um, some scholars would argue there's also an emotional component in that gratitude helps you experience other positive emotions, and
Right.
positive emotions are good in your life. So when you experience more gratitude, let me just say gratitude is both it's an activity, it's a thought, and it's also a feeling. It's all three,
Right.
right? There's a feeling component to it, which I know not a lot of people like to talk about feelings sometimes, but
Right.
there is a feeling component. You feel when you feel more grateful, you also feel other feelings, right? You feel joy, right? You might feel a sense of awe. If you feel grateful for, if you're in nature, if you're in a natural setting and you look at the sunset and the trees, there's a sense of awe of like, wow, the world is beautiful, right?
Right.
Um, Sometimes you feel a sense of relief, which is a positive emotion too. So
Right.
you get to experience a range of positive emotions. And we know from the research that experiencing positive emotions has a lot of net benefits. It
Right.
boosts your creativity. It also helps you to become more psychologically resilient. Yeah. So cognitive, emotional, social.
Mhm. It's dope. I love it. It's making me think. I feel like I said this in Ross's interview too. It makes me think of there's a Adrienne Marie Brown quote. I'm sure I used it, but it's like what you pay attention to grows, and I
Yeah.
feel like it just makes so much sense around gratitude, and particularly just I guess my own sort of anecdotal evidence. I definitely think that that's true. Like I know that it's true because it's like after you start practicing for a while, it seems like your mind just begins. It's easier to notice
Yeah.
other things. Like after
Yeah.
you do it for a while, it's like it's easier to bring yourself back more quickly from like anger or agitation because I'm
Yeah.
also one of those people who sometimes get angry and ruminate on things and I'm like, oh my God, like stop thinking. Like cut it off. And I definitely feel like these practices have done a lot, and just helping me to push. I often wonder, and this might be outside of the scope, because it feels like sometimes they're like the mental space is sort of primed to be more negative
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
than positive. And I'm like, what is that? I don't know if you can answer this, but I'm always like, what is that about? Like, why? Because it feels like you don't need to practice being negative, but you do need to practice being positive. Because it's like, and I don't know. It feels like that we're kind of set up, and maybe that's just me. But
Yeah. No. Yeah.
it
I'm like
seems,
that too.
yeah, it seems easier to lean on and to remember and to hold on to these negative thoughts. Whereas like the gratitude, those sorts of practices and the more positive emotions like joy, gratitude, love, like those are things you gotta fight for. It feels like
Yeah, yeah. No, I think you hit the nail on the head. That left to our own devices, many of us, I wouldn't say the whole world, but many of us would
right,
just veer towards the negative.
right,
It's just something that we notice and we pick up more quickly.
right.
And if you think about it, it's fascinating because if I can just very briefly meander into the realm of politics for a minute, without mentioning any
I
specific
was
individual. I'm
I
not
was
going to talk about
probably gonna
politics,
go
but
there soon anyway.
yeah,
Go
but
ahead, go
but
ahead.
right. but there's research showing that negative ads work better than positive ads.
Right,
People tend to be more impacted by negative ads. When you kind of put up a negative ad criticizing your opponents, that actually tends to work, which is why a lot of politicians like to show negative ads. So people are just drawn to the negative.
right.
Yeah,
That makes sense. Oh my God, I'm so that's funny because I'm so happy that these elections are over because I'm in South Carolina now with my family and they've been showing all of these ads and I was like, oh my gosh, like I was like free of it for a bit and now they're back and they're so intensely negative.
yeah,
And I think it's funny because that you mentioned politics because this was, I guess, on my mind even before we got into the call because I was just like, here we are the day after like a siege on the Capitol,
right.
right? Like
Depressing.
right, an attempt to overturn the American democracy. Like it's just kind of having lived through 2020, which was like a dumpster fire, uh, and living in a pandemic. It just seems like things just started like, oh, we're just gonna keep going. Like it just never. It seems
Right.
nonstop sort of negativity
Yeah.
around us, which for me feels like this is the moment. I'm very grateful that I'm getting to talk to you today because I'm like, this is the exact moment where I need to have a conversation like this, right? But I think that it's like, how do we convince, I don't even know if convince people is the right word, but just like compel people to pay attention to this, like to recognize the importance of gratitude in moments like this when things can feel so overwhelming, right? Like because it's like for many people, the life is it's just a very difficult time for so many people
Yeah.
right now. And saying something like, well, you should be practicing gratitude. That'll make things a little bit better. Might not be interesting to people who are experiencing some of the challenges that are coming along with the current moment. And so, like, I'm just wondering, like, how do what to do? Like, I don't even know what else to say. Like, what is the direction? Hey, I don't know.
Yeah, let's talk about that. And we can talk about both in terms of what's going on in the country as well as kind of personal challenges that people experience.
Right,
Um, yeah, I mean, I was, like you, very disturbed and shocked by what happened, yesterday with the um, assault on the Capitol, and in my view, an assault on democracy. It was shocking. And of course, the whole of 2020 has had a whole bunch of really bad events,
right.
multitude of bad events. With the COVID-19 pandemic, politically there were a lot of stuff that's going on too.
Racial
So
unrest.
yeah, and I think one way to think about them is that we should not obviously simply focus only on the positive and sort of ignore the negative. I think you know we do want to call it for what it is.
Right,
Like yesterday's events, for example, it's just bad. There's no other way to describe it. But I think one of the things I try to do, and I actually did that yesterday, was I wanted to acknowledge the atrocities that happened, and at the same time to also be acknowledge some of the good stuff that happened. And the two are not mutually exclusive. You know what I mean? And that's why I think that the balanced approach is to acknowledge both.
got it.
It's never one or the other. If you swing to either extreme, you say everything is just bad, everything is downhill, democracy is at the end. That's gonna bring you down the spiral of despair.
Right,
But if you swing to the extreme and say, oh, you know what, it's not a big deal, like, well, that's being naive, right? So we acknowledge all that is happening that's bad, um, and I look for glimmers of hope,
mm,
right? That despite some of the negative things that happened, uh, at the end of the day, the uh, Congress was able to certify
right,
the elections that was legitimately and fairly conducted, and certify Biden as and Harris as um, president and vice presidents. And in fact, there were some, like, just to give an example, there were some Republicans who were so appalled by
Right.
what happened yesterday that they were planning to not certify the elections and they switched their votes. And,
Right.
so um, I sort of I paid attention to those factors too. Not
Got
to
it.
say you're discounting the negative, but I pay attention to these factors, both the positive and negative,
Right.
to remind myself of what I can still be grateful for, you know, um, even in the midst of all that's happening. And I think the same principle applies to a lot of other big events like the pandemic. I think there's this the COVID-19 pandemic. There's no way of painting it in a rosy light. It
Right.
is just awful and bad.
Right.
And at the same time, I ask myself, what are some surprising things that occurred that maybe I didn't really anticipate, but some good things that sort of came my way as a result of the pandemic. And there are a few things, maybe not a lot, but there are a few things.
Right.
One of the things was that by being forced to stay at home and to be able to work from home, I get to spend a lot more time with my kids.
Hmm.
And I sort of developed a practice of going out for walks almost every day now with my kids, particularly with my daughter. And that's something I never would have done if I had been working in the office. So
Right.
it's one of those unexpected, surprising benefits that came along the way. Do I wish that the pandemic will go away? Of course I did. Do I think
Right.
it's horrible? Yes, it is. And I don't want to lose sight of the other unexpected things that I'm grateful for in the midst of the pandemic. So that's kind of that approach that I take.
I like that. I like that a
Yeah.
lot. And I think that I mean, it's such a good approach. Like, even just in reflecting on 2020 and how crazy everything was, like, there are going to be some positives, like you said, and particularly I think in maybe the interpersonal space, right? Like, I feel like for a lot of people, those sorts of relationships have been able to shift uh, inside of this. I was just like, me and my friends, they started like a FaceTime group, and there's like
Yeah.
30 people on. It's like so many. It is so
Yeah.
many people on these FaceTime calls or whatever, but they're also incredible, right? Like, especially at the beginning, it'll be the middle of the day, and we would just be talking to each other. And there are moments where my friend Athena, like her baby, is like one now, and we'll get to watch her put him to bed and like have bath time with Emery and Araya, like our friends' children. And it's like, when would have never happened before?
Yeah.
We would have never gotten these opportunities to talk to each other as much as we do, to really engage with each other's lives. I feel like the our friendships have like deepened and changed so much just because now like everyone isn't working all the time.
Right. Right.
Right, like, and now we have so much more time just to like check on each other. And I think just the in some ways the scariness of it all increases our desire to want to check on each other, right? There's so much going on, and just like recognizing that like I can't control all these things, but I do have the capacity to, like you said, check, to share and to recognize my role in my social groups, right? Like, and how I show up in those spaces, and how I am a friend to my friends, or how I might, like you talked about your relationship with your daughter. Like, it's really made me rethink through, like, oh, how do I show up in my family? Right? Like, how do I show up in these different spaces with people, with the people who are in my life? Because in being in grad school, also, I think just realizing like we sacrifice so much, like, to be in grad school. Like, we sacrifice, like, I could be making money, I could be kicking it with my friends, I could be doing a myriad of things, and we in this time has been like, oh, it's nice because I feel like I'm getting some of it back, like, and recognizing that, like, oh, this, I don't want my life to be like it was before. Actually, like, I don't want us to be living in fear of dying, from people breathing, but I also don't want it to go back to what it was like before. I enjoy, which feels, it's kind of like awkward. It feels weird sometimes to be like, oh, well, actually, there was some, like, it was okay. There were some parts that were okay.
Yeah.
But I do feel that way. There are things about just like uh my ability. I feel like I've lost some of my productivity mojo, and I'm hoping
Yeah.
2021 will bring some of that back. But I also feel like before it was like, you're always working, you're always doing these things, and now it's like, oh, you could just like stay on the phone with your friends, and that book is gonna be there. You know, like you can talk to, but your friends might not always be there. No, we won't always be here, you know. And so for me, that interpersonal dimension, I think more than anything in the course of the pandemic, I've been most grateful for, because I'm just like, wow, like I have real friends. Like, oh, this is cool. Like I don't think I had taken that in. Uh, or was as grateful for it before this. I don't even know if I recognized it, you know, as much as I do now. Just in the conversations we've been able to have, because I've had friends whose family members have been impacted during this time. It's like the support we've been able to give one another. I'm just like, oh, this is cool. Like these are, oh, we're like really friends, you know.
Yeah,
And that has been, it's just felt so good, you know.
yeah. I had similar experiences. You know, I've got some friends, childhood friends, and you know, four of us, and we now live in three different continents. You know, and you know, before we were keeping in touch as often, and then during this pandemic that we decided, I initiated, say, hey, you know, why don't we talk, meet over Zoom, you know, once a month and just kind of catch up with each other. And I don't think we would have done that but for the pandemic, you know. So it's just that it's been a blessing,
Right,
at least in that regard, that people are coming together to connect with each other and drawing support from one another. I think that's positive. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I think the same can some a somewhat similar principle can apply for kind of personally stressful or challenging situations in our lives where we don't have to sugarcoat it. We can acknowledge that it's bad. I mean, here
right,
I'm referring not just to the pandemic, but personal stressors, like things in your life that's not going well. You know, we can acknowledge that things are negative and things are not going well. And then at the same time, we can ask ourselves, but in the midst of these stressful situations, what can I still be grateful for? You don't necessarily have to be grateful for the negative thing that happened in your life. You know, I can just give a hypothetical example. If you broke up, say, a relationship, you know, say, oh, I'm grateful for the relationship. I'm grateful that the relationship broke up. No, sometimes it really hurts,
right,
but maybe there are other things related to that situation that you're grateful for. Maybe some lessons that you've learned,
right,
maybe you grow wiser. Maybe in the midst of your suffering, you received more social support from others. Maybe the difficult situation led to a new opportunity that you didn't consider previously.
right,
Maybe you're grateful for the fact that even though something bad happened, it could have been worse.
right,
You know, like maybe you felt sick, but you didn't die. You know, it could have been a lot worse. And so all of these different ways uh, of acknowledging the bad as well as finding the good in the bad is a balanced approach. And I refer to this as redemptive gratitude, right? As redemptive gratitude, as being able to find things to be grateful for, even in the midst of suffering.
I love that redemptive gratitude. I think it's funny. I have like an analogy that I think might not be that great, but it popped into my head as you
Got
were
good
talking.
analogies.
I'm
Go for
gonna
it.
try and see if it works,
Go
because
for it. I'll steal them from you.
take it, take it. But I was thinking, and I've been thinking about this as you were talking the whole time, just about like, and particularly around this idea of making sure that we're not trying to like avoid negative, you know, like but actually like reckon with it and still have this balanced approach. It makes me like gratitude isn't like a band-aid. Like you're not trying to cover up what's happening. It's more like the like neosporin. Like you still cut, but you're gonna like put that on, and it's gonna heal. You're gonna work and pay attention to it. You don't like the cut doesn't go away, but
Yeah.
you use the gratitude as a way to sort of like theorize, right? Conceptualize like other ways of viewing the cuts, so other ways of viewing the wounds that we might have, right? It doesn't have to be pretending that they're not there, but it's like, okay, well, this happened to me, and like you said, I like this idea of focusing on like, but I learned, right? This is a mistake I won't make again, or this is something that maybe you did grow, maybe you had a bad relationship and then you get out, but maybe you're a more loving person eventually once you feel healed better. You know, maybe you know how to interact in a way that is more um, conducive to being in a relationship in the future, right? Like, and sort of like thinking about that, it isn't about trying to hide the negative, but it's like reckoning with it and then still being able to see that like it's not all bad.
I like that. I like that. Yeah, I'm gonna steal that from you.
Take it.
Gratitude is not a band-aid. No, we're not.
It's not a bad thing.
We're not selling band-aids here.
I love this. I love
Yeah,
this.
no, you're right. Yeah, the wounds are there, the scars are there, and I like how you put it. You know, it's not like the scars are not there. It's you are viewing the scars in a different way.
Right.
Yeah,
I love this.
love
Oh my
that.
gosh, Joe, this was awesome. I guess as I'm thinking about closing out, is there anything that you wish I would have asked you, or anything that you feel like might be just like a good closing, or just a takeaway for the people?
Oh yeah, yeah. The I'm gonna go back to what you said. So I'm stealing this from you.
Go, go, go.
You know, there are few people who would dispute the fact that gratitude is good. You know, a lot of people, yeah, 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 I know it's good, I know it's good, but knowing that it's good is not good enough. you know, we got to do it. We got to practice. So the key is practice. The way to be grateful is to practice gratitude. So it's sort of that deliberate commitment to making gratitude a habit so that it is something that you actually do, not something that you simply feel or think about, but something you actually do, just like the way we drink coffee every day for some of us, or the way we exercise every day, or the way we, whatever thing that we do every day,
Right.
is the way we want to view gratitude as a practice, not just as a thought or a feeling. And that's, I hate, that's a lot of what you said, which I really endorse.
Thank you. That's the way. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Joe. This has been incredible, and I know that people are going to take a lot away from this.
I had a lot of fun too, and
Yeah,
just talking with you just made me happy and joyful and grateful.
yeah, me too. This was awesome. Oh.